My interest in the MCU is much like the quality of the MCU itself. It's all over the place. I watched quite a lot of the first two phases, then sort of fell off until Infinity War, then got back into it again, and then sometime after Endgame I ended up only really watching the movies and shows with friends or family. With the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, however, I thought I'd better catch up on what I've missed since Endgame before Disney and the MCU envelop the entire film industry, and every movie I see has some complicated tie-in and obligatory 10-second cameo. So, as I mentioned, I've seen a few things in phases 4 or 5, but not everything. There's no rhyme or reason. Some things I didn't even know existed. So, before we start the new stuff, I'll like this video and subscribe. Wait, no, you'll do that. I will do a lightning round on my thoughts of what I have seen. It was fun, Tom Holland is great, but Spider-Man is an idiot. Loved it. Very stylistic. Strange character decisions though. Hey, what happened to White Vision? Yeah, it's pretty good. Really liked it. Loki is a great character. It was alright. It was fun and weird, but some episodes were better than others. Loved it until the CGI mess third act. Not very good. A lot of fun in the theatre, and good but not amazing. Weird and inconsistent. Good ideas, but lots of wasted potential. Quite bad. Deplorable. Terrible, ugly as sin, boring as hell, and may have permanently affected my ability to enjoy movies. Loved it. Really good stuff. Alright, that's the stuff I have watched. Now, there's a lot of gaps in there, so this is really shaping up to be quite the task, but luckily, I've employed the help of my fiancée to help me with most of the shows and movies. She may or may not pop in to give her thoughts on the matter. I guess we'll see. Also, I just want to mention that I'm not going to be going through all of the shows and movies in excruciating detail and nitpicking every little problem like I did with my Snyderverse video. If that's something you want to see, I'm sure other people have already done it, because here I'm just talking about what I liked, what I disliked, and if I reckon it's worth watching. And I won't be summarizing the storylines that much, but I will be talking about plot points which might spoil things, so if you haven't seen the media in question, things might get a little weird. Without any further ado, first on the list is Hawkeye. I actually really enjoyed this. I wasn't sure what to expect because I didn't love Black Widow and I hadn't actually seen much about this one online, but felt like a reasonable point to jump back in. I wasn't overwhelmed, I wasn't confused, and it felt very Marvel. God, that's a nothing sentence I'm sure I'll be repeating in this video. I may as well start with what I liked. So, I loved the opening. I love seeing the fallout from previous films and events, even if we have already seen similar things in Spider-Man Homecoming. It's nice to see that these events actually affected people other than those on screen at the time, and that the Avengers' actions have far-reaching consequences. So good. Except, I really hated the line that Kate said at her father's funeral. Not a fan. I like that Kate starts off scrappy and imperfect and isn't a match for these people in hand-to-hand combat. Not everyone can be a martial arts god, and even through to the end you see that she's good, she holds her own, but she's not taking on Cap anytime soon. In fact, Kate, as a whole, is great. Haley Steinfeld killed it, the writing team did a good job of making her mostly enjoyable to watch, she's a great foil for Clint, and I think their relationship is really good. I like it, I like the progression and their arc, and I really appreciate how refreshingly platonic their friendship is. I hope we get to see more Kate Bishop in the future. This whole LARP section up top is super goofy and enjoyable. I mean, we get it. Hawkeye's cool and LARPing totally isn't, but it's fun and the characters it introduces are fun. Speaking of Hawkeye, he's good throughout as well. He's a bit too quippy for my tastes, but it's Marvel and he's a fitting mentor and you just can't help but root for him to get home for Christmas, you know? I also like that they fleshed out the Ronin a little bit. It felt slightly jarring when they barely addressed it in Endgame, but now we're seeing consequences, like Maya and her father, and it's very satisfying. Maya herself, total badass, very compelling to watch. Her fight choreography is good, the way they film her scenes in partial silence is good, and I like her pairing with Kingpin, especially seeing as he's so damn menacing. I think their whole relationship and drama is very interesting to watch, and both actors completely killed it. Very keen for Echo at this point. This car chase is sick. The trick arrows are fun, the cinematography is awesome, and it's just a really enjoyable sequence. Good stuff. Also, the USB arrow is back, and we love the USB arrow. Seeing Yelena go through the blip is fantastic, and I loved that transition. In fact, this whole episode intro is great, and Florence Pugh is awesome. She's very charismatic. The writing for her character is not, but I'll get to that in a sec. Jack is a total Chad. The mustache, the smile, those sword skills, he's just the best. I really like the trick arrows and how Kate uses them against Kingpin even after he snaps them. I have a few complaints that I'll address in a second, but for now they're visually interesting, they make the fights a bit more dynamic, and seeing them getting made was pretty fun too. And finally, the soundtrack is perfect, if for no other reason than I love Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. I want it to be my car's horn sound and my own personal theme song. Now for some stuff I didn't like. Much like every other Marvel property in recent memory, there is some pretty questionable effects work. Nothing broke the show for me, but things like the fire in Kate's apartment or just some of the effects work on their arrows are noticeably bad. It's not as bad as Quantumania because nothing is, but it's still a valid complaint. Some of the dialogue is also really bad. I mean, it's the classic Marvel quips, and mostly that's fine. It's what you expect, right? But some of it just goes way too far and for way too long. Like the scene in Kate's apartment with Yelena, that could have been really good, but they just took it too far and it stepped over into some cringe territory. It's also not just the quips and jokes either. There are some conversations that flow really strangely. It's as if the writers had to jam two conversations together and only had one or two lines to connect them. Really jarring. Jack being a red herring? Incredibly obvious. It's not terrible, and Kate's mum working for Kingpin, that whole plot twist, did make for a bit of tension coming into the last episode, but it was very predictable. Let's go back to that thing I touched on with the trick arrows. They're fun, and they're basically Hawkeye's entire gimmick, but they're also dumb as hell. Actually, let me rephrase that. So many of them appear to be super useful against groups, or big targets like Kingpin, or armored targets, but heaps of the ones we see in the final fight on the ice are just different and slower ways of taking out one guy. I mean, they're just regular humans, right? So surely a normal arrow will kill or incapacitate them just as easily as a jetpack arrow. I know this is absolutely a nitpick. I acknowledge that. And I enjoyed seeing them being used. I just felt like they were wasting them so hard when they should have just been using the ones that explode into 1,000 tiny thorns or whatever. If you want to take out one guy, just shoot him in the face. Anyway, that's pretty much it for Hawkeye. I like it. I recommend it, and it's left me pretty hopeful for some of the other series going forward. It's not too heavy, it's easily bingeable, it's paced really well, and the plot lines, while a little predictable, were satisfying enough that I can say that I enjoyed it from start to finish. Hey, I've got something to tell you. So I realized that I already wore my Pedro Pascal Oscar Isaac shirt. You'll just have to imagine me wearing it again, I guess. Anyway, I loved this. It was fresh, it was different, and it was really bingeable. Seriously, my fiance and I watched the first 5 episodes in one night. It felt super unique for Marvel, and it was completely standalone, which was a nice change of pace from Hawkeye, which was good, but it really felt like you had to have watched quite a bit of stuff to know who everyone was and what was going on. This, anyone can jump into and have a really good time, I reckon. So what did I like about it? Well, my first note says, what an uncomfortable way to start a show you're excited for. I hate the Foley artist. Yeah, it was super uncomfortable watching Ethan Hawke's character walk on broken glass, and it really made me curl into a little ball, but I loved it. I thought the whole opening for Steven was fantastic too. Just what a great setup for this absolute maniac of a character. A lot of mystery and a total onslaught of questions presented that really makes it impossible to stop watching. In fact, the whole show is pretty much like this, presenting question after question and resolving them in mostly satisfying ways. It's so easy to tell that Oscar Isaac had a blast playing Stephen Grant and Mark Spector. And it's a testament to not only the writing for these two characters, but his acting chops that seeing one man on screen so much is so consistently fun, dynamic, and compelling. Stephen Grant is an extremely entertaining oddity, and Mark Spector is an intriguing mystery to be unraveled. Their interplay and relationship and eventual full reveal is so satisfying, and Easily the best part of the show, hands down. Also, I love seeing Oscar Isaac switch personas within the one shot. Big fan. I love how they use editing to hint at the two personalities, cutting to black and then cutting back to Steven surrounded by bodies. It's such a neat way to keep that mystery alive and add to the sense of confusion. I've seen some criticism online about the lack of fight scenes, but I completely disagree. I think this approach really sets up the differences between Mark and Steven quite well. In addition to their character dynamic, I also like the joke about Steven's literal suit, and the differences between their two summoned suits is fantastic. They're both badass, they both look great, and there's good reasoning behind it. Seriously, I love this suit. When it's real. When it's CGI, it looks terrible. As well as the suits, there's also some great visuals and cinematography in this show, like the turning back of the night sky or some of the moonlit fights. I like Layla. She's a good addition to the progression of the show's reveals, and she leads us to some genuinely tense and creepy sequences. Also, the actress playing her is really good. And her avatar outfit? Absolutely sick. My fiance and I love the look of this one. The wings, the way she fights, it's just so great. And now my favourite part of the show, episode 5. The whole episode is fantastic and gut-wrenching. Some of it's overly telegraphed, but it's still a great continuation and culmination of these character arcs. The asylum sequences, the cutting to and from supposed reality, the memories that help our two main characters explore their relationship. Spectacular. We were confused, and we loved it. It was a really nice change of pace as well. I like how this show generally didn't rely on big fight sequences to keep people interested. Also, God, Ethan Hawke is great in this. I hate how much I hate him. Oh, and Hippo Lady is cool too. She's awkward and endearing, and we love her. Now onto some things I didn't like. Just like in Hawkeye, there's some pretty bad effects work here, except I think it's actually more noticeable in Moon Knight. Take the entire car chase sequence. I like how it cuts from Steven to Mark and back, but the whole thing looks pretty terrible. The cars barely look real, and the trees and rocks falling around them are so bad they could be stock effects. Also, Khonshu, he routinely looks quite cartoony. I've said many of the visuals look great, but anything involving Khonshu doing something in the actual physical environment did not. It's exacerbated in the finale, where we have a fight scene that looks really good and is well choreographed, especially the part where Steven throws a baton and Ethan Hawke deflects it and then Mark catches it. I love that part, but the other fight is just a big CGI god bash and it feels weightless and genuinely ugly. Not a great way to end the show. Also, this judge everyone line. Judge everyone! Yeah, super silly, very dumb. I feel like overall the dialogue is better in Moon Knight than it was in Hawkeye, but there are still some moments that are quite stiff and a little cringe. It retains a lot of the regular Marvel quippiness, but I kind of think it fits better here because of Steven's personality. Lastly, I like that Mark gets his freedom, sort of, but you probably should have just killed him, right? I mean, you've come this far, surely you can quit after this one. So yeah, I'm really positive about this one. The ending reveal, where we finally see the third personality, is great, and the twist with Khonshu finding a way around Mark's freedom is a fun segue into future Moon Knight stories, but it doesn't really seem like that's on the table at the moment. I'd love to see more of these characters and Oscar Isaac in general, but because of how much Marvel released in such a short amount of time, I think they've really shot themselves in the foot now that they're slowing down. There's so much to follow up on, but the gaps between them are getting bigger and bigger. Anyway, I hope we do end up seeing Moon Knight again, and in case it wasn't obvious, I really recommend this one. As I said before, you don't have to have watched a bunch of stuff to know what's happening here. You can just jump in, and it's just a really fun, enjoyable show. We're going super well so far. Wait, it's really important. Where's it gone? I almost feel like a broken record at this point, but this is the best one so far. Or at least, it's my favourite. I'm not always impressed with the MCU and its offerings, even when it does try to branch out in some aspects, so I'm always refreshed when a piece of Marvel media really sticks the landing in a unique way. And I can comfortably say that Ms. Marvel does that really well. It's not perfect, and I do have some complaints, but overall, I really enjoyed it. And every second Kamala Khan is on screen is just pure, unmitigated fun. I like Tom Holland's Spider-Man quite a lot, and coming into this I was a little worried that we'd be retreading a lot of the same awkward high school teenager ground, but they're actually insanely different. Iman Vellani brings so much charisma, energy, and goofiness to the role that it's infectious, and there are very few moments throughout the entire series that I wasn't smiling. So, let's get into what I liked. Spoiler alert, there's a lot. First off, again, I've said this every time, but I love the opening. My god, I love this opening. Stylistic, adorable, earnest, unique, efficient, and just very endearing. I think it does a great job of setting up Kamala's signature quirky style and character, and just setting a tone for the rest of the series. Within the first half of the first episode, 3 things became quickly apparent to me. Firstly, the editing is pretty great, and it's used really well within the context of the story. Not quite at the level of Moon Knight, but still good. Secondly, perfect soundtrack. It grounds the setting, characters, and tone really well, and it never gets old. I can't think of a single moment throughout the runtime when I thought the music wasn't great, actually, so just really good choices all around. Third, these cartoons in the background of shots are absolutely wonderful. Just a great representation of Kamala, and such a nice visual detail to separate it from other Marvel properties. Also, it just makes the shots more interesting to look at in a show that already looked good. God damn, Bruno, you made this? You're a genius and a future billionaire. Just drop out of school now, bro. The cinematography is awesome in general. There's obviously the cartoons, as I mentioned, but even something as simple as a text being represented on screen has been treated as a chance to show visual style and creativity. It's really refreshing to see this much thought put into something that other filmmakers might treat as mundane. I like how low the stakes are at the start. It gives a nice, cozy, slice of life sort of feel, and it's a good change of pace. The world isn't going to explode. It doesn't have to in every single piece of media. I feel this especially with Kamala's family, and the family is one of the best parts of the show. Yusuf Khan is the perfect goofy dad, and I love him. Muniba Khan is the perfect overbearing yet well-intentioned mother, and I love her. Amir Khan is the perfect goofy older brother, and I love him. He might be the best character in all of Marvel, plus he has a fantastic beard. You know, even without her newfound powers, I genuinely think that Kamala's costume was objectively the best. As a fellow daydreamer and resident of Fantasyland, I genuinely feel a strong connection to Kamala Khan. Massively relatable character. Another thing that's apparently very relatable is that little dance number to Be My Baby in episode 2. Love it. Super silly, and my fiancée immediately said that that's how she felt and acted when she first met me, so I'm pretty chuffed about that. I like the pacing and its slow burn introduction of the villains. We've had a nice build up to all of our main cast and their individual struggles. Although, once the villains are introduced, the pacing does get a little weird. I think Kamala's botched first superhero moment with Ice Cream Pizza Boy is a really nice subversion. There's only so many times we can see scenes like this play out in superhero media in general, and this was a really fresh spin that I thought worked well for the story and the characters. The next thing I have in my notes is the entire wedding. The wedding dance? Amazing. Brown Jovi? Incredible. Rocked my world. That sort of brings me to my next point, which is it's really cool to see a culture and setting so different from the other Marvel films and shows. It's totally new for the MCU, and from an outsider's perspective, it seems to be dripping with cultural style, visuals, and nuances. I hope it's a good representation for people of said cultures, because that would make me really happy. The show also tries to explore some interesting and quite serious topics. Coming of age, identity, the partition of India. I'm not exactly qualified to give a history lesson here, but episode 5 showed us a human, grounded part of the world that Marvel has never really touched on before, and it didn't feel out of place at all. I love Kamala's suit. It suits her perfectly, it's not over-designed, and I love that she just wears regular shoes with it. It's great. And lastly, Kamala's interactions with all of her friends are super fun to watch. There's that same level of awkwardness that we see with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but where Peter Parker always seems desperate to get out of the situation, Kamala Khan unabashedly thrives on the silliness. Okay, let's move on to some criticisms. So, I touched on the pacing before, and I said that I liked it, until the villains are introduced. I'm really not sure what happened here. Kamran's mother and the rest of the clandestines make for lukewarm antagonists anyway, but the change between laying it on thick to get Kamala on their side and then becoming so overtly evil that they'd kill a child is instant. It basically happens between scenes, it's so fast. Also, her flipping on a dime again to go into the veil was kinda lame. Unfortunately, the whole red daggers thing happens too fast as well. These characters get introduced, then their whole faction is explained in one scene, and then old mate sacrifices himself and I guess we're supposed to feel something? I think that might have meant a little bit more if he'd been on screen for longer than the duration of a single YouTube short. In fact, I think the whole show is too short. Don't get me wrong, it's really good, but it suffers from being compacted towards the end. At the start, they definitely gave everything enough time, but there are a lot of plot and character points that I feel needed to have enough breathing room to properly land, and later in the show, they didn't get it. Take episode 5. The first half is fantastic, but the second half feels rushed and kind of fumbles the bag. So I know I said I liked the editing a lot, and I do, but not for the action scenes. Much like almost every other Marvel property, it's really jarring. Especially in this car chase, it feels like they can't ever just let a shot lie for more than 3 seconds. It's always bouncing all over the place. Guys, I just want to see what's happening on screen. Lastly, the dodgy effects are back. I didn't love how her powers looked at the beginning, but at least it was pretty sparing. But in the finale, both of their big crystal goo powers look like arse. It's such a shame. The rest of the show looks quite vibrant and impressive. It's just let down by what I can only imagine are Marvel executives cracking the whip to get this thing churned out as quickly as possible while, working a bunch of underpaid artists into the ground. Sad. I highly recommend Ms. Marvel. Not only is it great for representation, Kamala Khan is the MCU's first Muslim superhero, and it explores the South Asia setting and culture, but it's just a damn good time. The emotional beats land well, the family and secondary characters get utilised in really satisfying ways, and the acting is always solid. I don't love how Kamran and his mother's story gets resolved for now, but it's probably a symptom of the condensed show. In any case, I'm a big fan. Some genuinely great comedic moments and serious ones, and quite refreshing. I cannot imagine that the quality keeps going up from here, but much like the others, this has left me quite excited for what's to come. Oh, come on. I think we've hit our first fork in the road. Also, I know we watched this out of order, but we loved Ms. Marvel and we wanted to see more of Kamala Khan, especially after that end credit scene with Brie Larson. It's my video, sue me. So I feel like there's a bit of context needed for this movie, far more so than for the other shows we've just talked about. The Marvels was a huge flop. It's the lowest grossing MCU film to date by over $50 million US, and it had a huge budget. So what happened? Well, there are a lot of theories. It's a bad movie and word of mouth did its thing, superhero fatigue, girls are yucky and we don't want to see them on our screen. Right up top, this is far from the worst MCU film. That honour goes to Ant-Man 3, which made more than double what this did. It's not the best, but it's not so bad that I would tell people not to see it. Superhero fatigue is a thing, but Guardians 3 made heaps of money, so that's clearly not the whole story, and regardless of what incel grifters like Critical Wanker try to tell you, having women in lead roles does not make a film inherently less good or less profitable by itself. I think some of these things contributed, but I think another big factor is that it follows directly on from Ms. Marvel, Captain Marvel, and WandaVision, so you have to have watched all of those properties to fully understand the characters and where these events are coming from. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first MCU movie that follows directly on from a show, or 2 shows. So I can absolutely see why a lot of people might have skipped it if they haven't seen those other properties. The general audience just might not have had that requisite knowledge. Now, I'm not an expert, and as I said, there were many factors that clearly went into this being a failure for Disney, but I just wanted to get that out of the way up top before I get into my opinions on it. So I'm a little torn on the Marvels. I thought that a lot of it was really enjoyable, but every time I thought we were getting into a good rhythm, the film would shake me out of it and leave me disappointed. Let's get into specifics and what I thought that the film did well. Just like Ms. Marvel, I love the cartoon sequence at the start. It's cute and extremely naive. Kamala's family are back as the comic relief of this film, and there's
just enough of them in here to justify their inclusion. I enjoyed seeing them a lot. I also feel really bad for them and their house because Carol Danvers is a complete menace. Speaking of, what a fun premise. The three characters are introduced quite well and their whole switching mechanic is seriously cool. It has so much potential. I think it could have lived up to it more, but I love the idea. The fight scene that ensues following this first switching is great, and a really good showcase of their abilities with some suitably flashy choreography. I like seeing Monica Rambeau again, and I thought all three leads had really good chemistry. Their performances are great, but once again, Iman Vellani is an absolute standout because her on-screen energy is just so infectious. She is the perfect Kamala Khan, who is basically my favourite character now because of her. Iman Vellani, if you ever see this, you're the best. Nick Fury's pretty good as he always is, but he doesn't have much to do in this film. Wow, there seem to be some actual consequences for our heroes and their actions. I'm not saying that's necessarily new, but it's definitely not always consistent. I think it works well for both Carol's character and the general dynamic of this film to have her essentially be this genocidal maniac to the Kree. It poses a bunch of interesting questions and lends itself to some really compelling villains. Unfortunately, those questions are never really explored as deeply as I'd like, and the villain is less than compelling. I do like the idea though, and it gives me shades of Civil War, which I really enjoyed. The fights and effects in this film look way better than the shows. I mean, they should. This film cost nearly $300 million, but it's nice that they do, and I definitely can't say the same about Quantumania. No, I'm not going to stop bringing it up, and you can't make me. There's some really interesting fight scenes too, like the one on Aladna where the three Marvels use the techniques they've practiced to make the most of their unique switching situation. Also, seeing Monica Rambeau just straight up phase through this group of soldiers is absolutely sick. The scene on the ship beforehand where they are practicing their powers is also really fun, and it solidifies this combination of characters. This Flurkin scene is cute and funny, but it feels a little shoehorned in and too quick, and we'll get to why soon. And finally, Iladna itself. It's goofy, it's fun, and it's no doubt as polarizing as the entire film. I like how unique and out there it is. I like that they've really tried to do something different, but the actual shtick wears pretty thin, pretty fast. That brings me to the other side of the coin. While we're on the topic of Aladna, the singing starts off fine, then gets too much, borders on cringe, then steps fully over that line. It's interesting, but it's not for me. The warriors' suits are also quite bad. They look cheap and rubbery, and for a film that cost this much money, I find that quite surprising. Speaking of bad suits, Kamala's is a direct downgrade from her Ms. Marvel suit. It too looks cheap and ill-fitting. It's strange to me that not only would they give her a new suit so quickly, but one that's bad. The mid-credits scene did nothing for me. I truly could not possibly care less that Monica Rambeau is now trapped in this X-Men universe and her mother doesn't know anything about her. And I can't really put my finger on why. I think it has to do with the fact that even if this does end up leading somewhere, it won't be for ages. I don't care. Let's get into some real issues. I hate the villain in this film. She's forgettable. She has a strong motivation, but a really predictable plan and follow-through. Nothing about her actions or presence on screen surprised me in the slightest. I also didn't find her remotely compelling. I said she was forgettable. I had to look up her name. If you've seen this film, I will give you 5 seconds to remember what her name is. Did you do it? It's Dar-Benn. If you had a gun to my head for that name, this video would be a lot shorter. Zor Ashton, who plays Dar-Benn, gave a profoundly terrible performance. I hated almost every moment she was on screen. It felt like overacted melodrama, and believe me, I do not love calling her out like this. I feel like a dick, but I just didn't enjoy her performance at all. I've never seen anything else she's been in, so she could be a fantastic actress for all I know, but it didn't come across. I'm equally certain that part of the blame lies with the director and Marvel itself, but it's very hard to come back from having a bad villain. Thor 2 had the same problem, and it's one of the worst MCU films. That's not even the biggest issue with this film though. In my opinion, what really held the Marvels back is its runtime. It's the shortest MCU film at an hour and 45 minutes. Now, that's not actually that short, and it's not bad in and of itself, but it feels like they started with a 140-minute script and had to cut and slash until we got this. This means that the pacing is quite poor, and with so much vying for screen time in a short film, it feels bloated but shallow. It's just not long enough to achieve all the things they wanted to achieve. Events race past, and we never get characters fully developed, or relationships satisfyingly explored, or consequences fully realized. It's like I said earlier, I would have loved to see more of Carol being the annihilator to the Kree, or see her and Monica go through a bit more together before making up, but the runtime simply doesn't allow it. It's a goofy movie, it's a fun movie, it's got a lot of comedy. That's clearly what they were going for. That's why we have so much of Aladna and the singing and Carol being a princess, and so little of the villain being anything other than a chick with a hammer. I get it. They don't need to have a deep and scary antagonist who subverts all our expectations, but if anything, I don't think they leaned far enough away from that to make it work. It feels like they tried to have their cake and eat it too by combining so many different ingredients but not fully exploring what made the movie fun in the first place. So with all that said, I did enjoy this film, just not as much as I could have. It was a fun, easy watch with some really good elements, but it's not one of the better MCU entries. I can see why this wasn't a huge hit and why it wasn't rated super highly, but I also don't think it deserved to be the lowest grossing. There are heaps of films I can think of that are worse than this one. Thor 2, Thor 4, The Eternals, Ant-Man 2, Ant-Man 3. I know it's just my personal opinion, but I really don't think it was as bad as some people make it sound. If you enjoyed Ms. Marvel and Captain Marvel, then you should probably give this one a watch. After all, it won't take you very long. I didn't want to move Misty, so I guess I'm standing up to record this one too. We're back, baby. I really liked She-Hulk, and I'm not afraid to say it. I feel like Marvel have done a really good job of changing up the tone and vibe of most of these shows. It doesn't feel like I'm watching vague shades of the same thing over and over. Everything sort of stands on its own 2 feet. Which I genuinely wasn't expecting. I also wasn't expecting you to jump back onto my shoulders, dude. Are you good? I know that Marvel have formulas they love to stick to, and they know that too. And this show definitely knows it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So right up top, I will say that the opening to She-Hulk is nowhere near as good as the opening to the other 3 shows. It introduces us to the whole self-referential fourth wall breaking thing that Jen does, but apart from that, I found it pretty uninspiring and a little too jarring in its pacing. It also has some really ham-fisted exposition and poor dialogue, which sadly continues throughout. Also, yeah, I'm changing up my reviewing style. It's my video. If Marvel can change their properties from one to the next, why can't I? Sue me. Speaking of suing, nailed that segue, by the way. This is billed as a legal comedy, but I feel like it's more of just a general comedy. It has that episodic sitcom feel that I think they were going for, and is quite funny most of the time, but a lot of the actual lawyering gets hand-waved away, and we see precious little of Jen being the good lawyer she's supposed to be. We get told she's good, but I don't think we get shown it quite enough. In any case, I think the comedy lands pretty well. There's the odd joke or quip that's a little on the nose, or cringe, or just flat, but I've come to expect that from Marvel, and there's far fewer than, say, Thor 4, which was built upon flat jokes. The fourth wall breaks really grew on me. I didn't think I was going to like them at all at the start, but by the end I found them quite endearing. I also think that in this show, the comedy works better than the action, which, that's pretty good, that's what they were going for, clearly, but the action in general feels a little lackluster. So let's talk about our characters. Jennifer Walters is an interesting hero. We've seen other reluctant heroes even in the MCU, but it's not that she's afraid she can't handle it or she doesn't want the burden, she just prefers to be a lawyer in the beginning. That's new and nice and a cool character conflict for her to resolve. Daredevil shows up eventually, he's really cool too. I haven't seen the show, but I really enjoyed seeing him and his difference in approach to Jen. Emil Blonsky was fun, and I think they used just the right amount of him. Any more, and he probably would have overstayed his welcome. The supporting characters are fairly solid, and there's some relatable humour in there, some annoying pricks to bristle at, but there's no big standouts like Kamala's family and Ms. Marvel. In terms of acting, Tatiana Maslany was really good as Jennifer Walters and totally pulled off those fourth wall breaks, but I can't really think of any other standout performances, to be honest. Daredevil was good, Mallory Book was good, but I just wasn't blown away. Again, I didn't feel that same connection to anyone like I did for Kamala Khan or her family or Stephen Grant. I thought the overall story had plenty of highs. I enjoyed Jen's struggle to live a normal life and her rivalry with Titania. In fact, that whole wedding episode where we spent the first 75% just kicking Jen while she was down, great stuff. I also enjoyed the She-Hulk by Titania side plot. That felt almost like The Boys. It seems like Marvel are playing into the wider world of superheroes a lot more, and I think that's a smart idea. Unfortunately, I also found most of the story quite predictable. I genuinely called that entire plot line about men only wanting to date Jen as She-Hulk, and Josh being bad. That was incredibly obvious. I will admit, I totally thought Emil and his therapy buddies were going to stab her with a needle, so I'm glad my suspicions were wrong there, but it felt pretty formulaic. Until the finale. I wasn't impressed by the order of events at all until the extreme fourth wall break started to happen in the finale. Spoiler alert, I guess? I thought that was quite an impressive subversion, because I never thought that, even with how self-referential and self-aware the show was, that they would actually take She-Hulk to Marvel Studios, but here we are. I also liked the little subversion about Kevin, who even had Kevin Feige's little baseball cap. That was cute. I thought they brought it together quite well. It rounded out both the quirkiness and style of the show and Jen's character. Plus, it's nice to see that the MCU doesn't take itself too seriously. That being said, it is a little disappointing to know that it acknowledges these issues with its own potential and actual storytelling, then doesn't do anything about it. We're still getting boring schlock like Ant-Man 3. If you know the formula is holding you back, stop using it so much. So, some other general stuff that I liked. Matt and Jen, they're cute together. I don't know if I'm committing some cardinal sin here. I haven't read the comics nor have I seen Daredevil the show, but I like them together. The incel montage in episode 3 was a great way to address Marvel's shittier vocal fans. If you think like those people, you're a loser and Marvel is making fun of you. That brings me to the Megan Thee Stallion cameo. It was short, amusing, tonally consistent with the rest of the show, and had zero wider implications about the writing or the MCU itself. I saw so many people talking about this cameo online as if it was a big deal, but it's not. Sure, it's a little cringe, but so are so many other cameos in the MCU, and that's not ruining my time, so why should this? Anyway, there's still more things that I liked. I liked Donnie Blaze and Wong's part in the story, thought that was all good stuff. I think that Wong is a tad stupid at times, but it's certainly funny. Also, Wong and Madison with 2 N's, 1 Y, but it's not what you think, are a love story for the ages. Or just a great friendship story for the ages. I like hearing Bruce talk about his time with the Avengers and the Blip, and especially Tony. There aren't that many OG Avengers left, so this was a really nice moment. And finally, I am obsessed with Luke Jacobson, the supersuit guy. He is amazing and just so good on screen at all times. Okay, some things I didn't like. So the effects for Hulk and She-Hulk are so good, periodically, but so often it ends up looking uncanny valley levels of weird and bad. Very inconsistent, and with Jen being She-Hulk for so much of the runtime, there's a lot more opportunity to screw it up. There are heaps of shots where her face just looks janky and almost like a wax figure. I also thought that the entire show had quite a boring visual style. I get that they were going for pretty much a total parody of a legal drama, but I found the cinematography, color grading, and editing to be very bland.
Don't do it, Jen.
Okay, what is she meant to do? Just let everyone here, including her parents, see this revenge porn tape of her? Yeah, no. Jamila Jamil's wig is awful. Like, an affront to my eyes, awful. And finally, Jen's gala dress was a little disappointing. I thought it was only okay, and it definitely didn't blow me away. I liked the surplus neckline, but it really lacked a bit of uniqueness that I would have expected from such a hyped designer, and the sleeves did absolutely nothing for me. I know that's a strange nitpick, but what can I say? I like a bit of fashion. So that's She-Hulk. I wasn't sure what to expect going in, but by the end, I was very pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it a lot. Not as much as Ms. Marvel or Moon Knight, but probably as much, if not more, than Hawkeye. Just a very comfortable watch with low stakes and character-centric drama. Plus, my fiancé and I binged it in a single night. It certainly has faults, however, and has continued some of the issues with previous properties without any hint of slowing them down. It also significantly relies on having seen a lot of other Marvel stuff, especially at the beginning, so it's probably a lot harder for a general audience to access. If you're watching this video, you've probably seen pretty much everything in the MCU anyway, and if you have, I recommend giving She-Hulk a watch. It's funny, different, weird, and easy. It doesn't seem super pivotal to the wider narrative. I mean, neither did some of the others, but I think that if this style of comedy or self-awareness isn't for you, then you can definitely skip it without any ramifications. I'm glad I didn't, though.
I don't get it. I just don't understand. Where does he go? Where does he go? So in a kind of anticlimactic way, I don't have that much to say about this one. It had a great pulpy tone from the first second, and while I'm not an expert on the genre, it felt like a fun callback to classic horror flicks. I really enjoyed it, and obviously I do have some notes on it, but it was short and sweet, so I don't have all that many complaints. In fact, the only nitpicks and criticisms I really have are about the effects and the dialogue. Right near the start, there's a pretty awkward expository conversation that just grinds the intro to a halt immediately. At this point, I can conclusively say that Marvel has an exposition problem. It's not an issue exclusive to Marvel. I know that comic book movies often have a lot of information to get across that gets delivered quite poorly, but I've had this complaint about almost everything I've watched so far. To be fair, the dialogue does improve somewhat, and it's pretty much the only substantial complaint I have, but come on. It's every property. The effects, as I mentioned, are not amazing, but they are both sparing and pulpy, which of course is what they were going for, so I can't really tell if it's intentional. I am of course referring to Ted, or Man-Thing, who sometimes barely looks like he occupies the same visual space as the other characters. He was pretty cute though. Other than that, everything looked thematic, tonally consistent, and fantastically macabre. The whole visual style, the film grain, the garish bright red blood spurts, it all worked so well for this dramatic horror theme. Yeah, we watched this in colour, because that's what came up first on Disney Plus, and I didn't really realise there was a black and white version. So, yeah. It's a small thing, but I like how they only show Jack in his werewolf form indirectly at first, building up to the reveal with this close-up on the stepmother to really delay giving us the full effect. Again, it's so dramatic and fitting for the genre. I loved the funeral scene, and it is with great sorrow that I inform you my fiancé has banned me from puppeting myself at my own funeral like that, because it's a great icebreaker. Seriously though, I loved the creepiness of that sequence, and the setting in general. The makeup team killed it all around. Big props to them. And finally, the move where Elsa kills that guy with the sword was slick as hell. Very badass. So yeah. That's pretty much it. I thought it was a good dip into the classic horror genre, it was unexpected, and I had a great time watching it. Completely standalone, a comfortable, quick watch, and a pretty nice break from the wider MCU. I'm pretty impressed that they made this at all, to be perfectly honest, and I absolutely recommend watching it if you have a spare hour.
So I don't know how hot this take is, but I didn't love the first Black Panther. I'm happy to say, however, that I enjoyed Wakanda Forever a lot more. It's definitely lacking something without Chadwick Boseman, but overall I found it a more interesting and consistently compelling watch. Plus, T'Challa's funeral scene was beautiful. Letitia Wright did a good job of taking up the mantle in both a narrative and meta-narrative sense, and the writers did really well in sharing the spotlight around amongst the main cast. As always, Angela Bassett was fantastic and managed to do some stellar work with some very average dialogue. As seems to now be tradition for Marvel, some of the dialogue is stilted to the point of parody, either to fit in an extra mid-fight quip or to jump from the current topic of conversation to the next important plot point to be exposited. Unfortunately, it only becomes more apparent as the movie goes on, but the rest of the film is done well enough that it's rarely more than a thorn in the side of an otherwise enjoyable experience. Namor is super weird, and actually quite sick. I wasn't sure what to expect, but Tenoch Huerta does a seriously commendable job of following up on the raw charisma that Michael B. Jordan brought to the first film as Killmonger. Namor is a very different villain, and he's pretty great to watch develop on screen. My only gripe with him as a character is that Marvel do that zero nuance thing again, where they have him actually be in the right about the conquistadors with a strong and reasonable motivation, but then they make him take it about 12 steps too far so he can still be the villain. I'm glad that they didn't kill off the compelling and interesting villain for once, and I look forward to seeing a bit more of him so we can solidify his ending in this film, but it just wasn't as satisfying as it could have been. Also, I really don't love the effects for his little foot wings. It looks pretty jank. Namor also brings a whole slew of shiny new things and people into the MCU. I like the idea that there's vibranium outside of Wakanda, and it makes total sense that that would be a fairly huge deal. I don't think they follow up on these concepts quite well enough to form a cohesive conclusion, however, which is a little disappointing because it's a fairly long film. Talokan is an awesome concept, but the effects are pretty off. It's hard to get a good sense of it when it's all hazy and obviously just added in post. Some good world building expansion though. Speaking of effects, I think Wakanda looks so much better in this film, as does the Black Panther herself. The other actors all give solid performances, and I particularly enjoyed the back and forth between Riri Williams, Shuri, and Okoye. I thought they had great chemistry that really reminded me of the three Marvels. Riri Williams herself is fine, but I really don't love the design of her two Ironheart suits. I appreciate that they're well differentiated from Iron Man, but God are they ugly. Shuri's suit, however, looks great when she finally puts it on. I like that she doesn't become Black Panther until late in the piece, and I thought that the character reasoning and motivation for it was a nice lead into the finale. Not very original, but still good. In fact, the costume department killed it in general. Almost everything looks fantastic, especially the combat outfits. They're detailed, thematic, visually interesting, and incredibly badass. There's some really good fight choreography too, mostly involving Okoye. That spear move in the car was just chef's kiss. That being said, there's a lot of slow motion in the action scenes, and some of the non-action scenes. Too much. There's too much slow motion. It feels like I'm watching a certain other director. This personal submarine craft thing, seriously cool. And finally, I really liked the analyzing sequence heading into the finale. Such a good change of pace towards the end and a perfect showcase of Shuri as a character. It made the final battle feel like less of a straight punch-up, more satisfying, and it provided some explanations for things that might have otherwise seemed contrived. As I'm sure you can tell, I'm pretty positive about this one. It was a lot better than the Marvels, but I don't know if it's as good as the shows we've been through so far. It fixed a lot of issues from the first film, but it had some fairly questionable pacing overall and really lacked a conclusion to just a few too many plot threads for such a long film. I hope that some of that gets followed up on in the future, but again, you just never know at this point. The Ironheart series keeps getting pushed back further and further, and I swear, I don't think we'll ever get a Blade film. In any case, if you've somehow managed to make it all the way to this point in the video and haven't already watched Wakanda Forever, I think you should. It sets up for quite a bit in the future and brings back a lot of characters into the limelight. I'll get him on the next one. So, Marvel's first holiday special. It's even shorter than Werewolf by Night. It has the characters we know and love from the first two Guardians films and the magical Kevin Bacon. It's funny, it's goofy, it's weird as hell, but I didn't love it. It was fine and even fairly enjoyable, but I also just thought it was trying too hard, you know? The song at the start was a banger and funny in an off-kilter way, and I love Cosmo the space dog, but when it got to the actual story, the Drax and Mantis sections, I just really felt like it was a bit too much. Drax on his own is a bit too much. Mantis on her own is a bit too much. Nearly half an hour of them together is a lot too much, in my opinion. I'm glad these characters got a chance to shine, and I know it's just a goofy little special that doesn't really matter to the overall story, but it just really dragged until the ending for me. Admittedly, the ending is very wholesome, and Kevin Bacon's song to save Christmas on Nowhere is great. I like the Kraglin and Kevin Bacon scene, and there are a lot of cute little moments like with the gifts or the lights for Peter, but the dialogue really got to me, just like pretty much every other Marvel project. Also, I find Nebula to be a little bit cringe sometimes, and sadly, this was one of those times. Yeah, that's all I really have to say about this one. It's short and funny and fine, and if you're invested in the characters and you really like them, then yeah, give it a watch, but otherwise, I'd probably just skip it. For some reason, I just couldn't get into this one. I don't know whether it's because I've been watching all of...
I got you!
What?
I need to tell you something about Secret Invasion.
What, are you gonna spoil it for me? I already know that Rhodey's a Skrull.
No, I'm just here to warn you. Don't watch it, man.
Kinda have to for the video, but thanks, I guess.
You don't understand. This might permanently affect your ability to enjoy the MCU.
Quantumania already did that, bro.
This is worse.
What?
Okay, maybe not worse, but it's over 3.5 hours long. It's pretty painful.
Why are you telling me this?
Don't make the same mistake I did. Just skip this one.
You know I have to watch it for the video. Now I'm gonna go in knowing it's bad and expecting it to be bad, and I'm gonna hate it even more. What's wrong with you? Do you want this video to come out?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're sorry? The damage is already done, idiot. What'd you think was gonna happen? I was just gonna take you at your word? And hold on, wouldn't that create a paradox if I never watched it, but you're still
trying to do a
warn
good
me?
thing.
Are you trying to
what?
destroy the
Fine.
universe?
Let's just Men in
Or
Black
is
this
this
shit.
I'm sorry, what? Did you say Men in Black? Allow me to summarize Secret Invasion for you. Imagine two actors sitting in a well-decorated room having a conversation that takes twice as long as it needs to and makes you feel nothing. That is 50% of this show. What makes this experience worse is the fact that the premise is fantastic. I've never read any of the associated comics, but surely it would have been so easy to make something good, or at least interesting, on the back of this premise. But it's not. It's boring as hell. Alright, let me be charitable for a second and mention what I like before I tear this thing to shreds. Sam Jackson looks good with the beard, seeing Ben Mendelsohn again is nice, there's some good acting sometimes, and Olivia Colman is a shining beacon of joy. I love her performance and I wish she'd been in every second scene. Okay, let's start at the start. The first episode isn't terrible. It provides a setup for our plot. The setup is meandering and long-winded, but so is the plot itself, so I guess that's consistent. They had the balls to actually kill someone, but it feels pretty cheap, and even here in the first episode, the cracks are already showing. It's full of bad dialogue, poor editing, and it raises a ton of shallow questions that can retroactively improve or destroy this episode based on the payoffs and answers. Spoiler alert, the answers, when they're even given to you, are dumb. Also, Maria Hill feels like she was only here to die. All she does is tell Nick Fury who he is and how he's changed and repeat his own supposed words back to him. It sure is nice being told all of this stuff. Thank God we never have to see it on screen. Can you imagine how boring that would have been? What is this? If it feels like I'm mad at this show, it's because I am. After episode 1, these issues only compound and snowball. I said half of the show is people having boring, pointless conversations, but the dialogue is terrible, so these very frequent scenes are excruciating. Even when the acting is good, it feels this way, and sadly, the acting isn't always good. This show makes Ben Mendelsohn look like a bad actor sometimes, and I hate that. Seriously, he gives some truly terrible line deliveries in this show. Even Sam Jackson does some questionable acting. On top of that, the conversations all feel contrived because the writers seem determined to take the dumbest, most obvious course at every turn. Speaking of obvious, the entire plot is pathetically predictable. There's not a single twist that isn't telegraphed for miles. There wasn't a single big reveal that made me feel something, and they give way too much away, way too quickly. I didn't even care that Rhodey was a Skrull. I know the internet spoiled that for me months ago, but even if you didn't know, it wasn't exactly a Sherlock Holmes level mystery. It wasn't intriguing or thought-provoking, it was just confusing. I wasn't sitting there wondering what he was going to do next, or how he was going to mess with the heroes. All I was wondering was, how long has he been a Skrull, and why does this matter? And that's a common thread. The premise of this show is that there are a million Skrulls, and they could be anywhere, looking like anyone, right? So why don't you do, anything with that? Beyond the obvious Rhodey reveal, I can't recall a single time that this shapeshifting was used to further tension or create doubt, or even just to provide one bit of complication for this lazy story. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And no, I don't think the Skrull Council counts at all, because we're shown immediately that they're Skrulls before we're shown them doing anything. The show itself doesn't even care how long these important people have been Skrulls. Or it doesn't have the answers. Or both, maybe? Anyway, it makes the villains seem incompetent and weak. Gravik, the big bad of this show, is a terrible villain. He's cartoonishly, mustache-twirlingly evil. He has a weak and a childish motivation for his over-the-top genocidal aspirations, and the entire premise for his plotline is painfully contrived. Also, he's a total dumbass. His plane plan? Insane. It could have gone wrong in 1,000 more ways than it could have gone right. It genuinely feels like Rhaegal's death in Season 8. He's not a good leader, which is proven by the mutiny, so how did he get into this position? Also, does he seriously intend to wipe out every single human being on the Earth because of Nick Fury? Okay, let's talk about the stakes. They're meant to be as high as they could possibly be, right? Humanity is on the line and World War III is approaching. I don't buy it. I didn't feel any tension throughout this show. They did a really poor job of making the stakes seem real. I think it's because they focused on the wrong things. They tried to create this intriguing espionage thriller, but they wasted so much time on useless backstory and self-indulgent exposition. The pacing in this show is shockingly bad. I don't need an action scene every 5 minutes, but having something happen more than once an episode would be nice. In fact, even the action scenes are slow and boring. Yeah, just stand there, lads. No need for situational awareness here. Don't even get me started on the finale. Well, I guess you can. I'm gonna talk about it. So, this big fight with Gravik and Gaia is so bad that it almost breaks the MCU. Not only are the effects terrible because all the arms they paste onto the two of them are very badly proportioned, but the arms and powers themselves make absolutely no sense. Why would you ever need a Drax arm when you have Hulk DNA? Wait. When they get Ebony Moore's arms, they get his rings too? What the f***? Also, how do they not only know what all of the powers are and what they do, but how to use them? And, my main complaint, they get all of the powers, and Gaia is just like this now? She's essentially one of the most powerful beings in the universe because she played a very simple trick on Gravik. More is not always better. This fight, man, it's so anticlimactic. The whole finale is, and the president thing is jarringly stupid. Yeah, sure, promising genocide on international television is sure to get everyone on your side, and such a satisfying conclusion to this logical, well-crafted show. There is no internal logic that explains this finale in a satisfying way. Even the lead up to the ending is devoid of logical explanation. Fury, why didn't you call the Avengers?
This is personal.
Oh, of course. Let's walk the knife's edge of failure because I'm too proud. It's a nice shade you've put on that lamp there, Marvel, but it doesn't make the plot any less colossally stupid. I have 3 more nitpicks and then I'll try and wrap this thing up. Firstly, I hate that they call themselves Super Skrulls. I'm sure it's a comic thing, but it sounds stilted as hell. Secondly, there are some truly awful cinematography in this show. It looks genuinely ugly quite a lot of the time. And lastly, the title sequence is awful. It straight up looks like AI generated art. Because it kind of is. I hate it. So this show naturally draws unfortunate comparisons to The Winter Soldier. That film was awesome and nailed the intrigue. Secret Invasion throws that out the window harder than Cap throws himself in that film. It asks way more questions than it answers, and it relies on so much incompetence and contrivance that it feels completely weightless. It's also excruciatingly self-indulgent. The innumerable conversations all have the air of profundity, but none of the substance. You can tell that they think they're genuinely meaningful and clever, but in a better show, they'd be highly condensed and wouldn't repeat themselves ad nauseum. Secret Invasion feels paired with Quantumania to become the ultimate culmination of all of the problems within the MCU. Pacing, effects, dialogue, contrivance, it's all come to a head. Where previous projects might have had a whiff of some of these issues, Secret Invasion reeks of all of them from a mile away. I sincerely hope that Marvel learned from their mistakes with this one, because I don't think it was received very well. Anyway, I cannot in good conscience recommend anyone watches this show. If you're watching this video, you may well have already watched it, but if you haven't, then don't. Just look up a plot summary online, it'll be fine. I wish I hadn't watched this show. God, I wish I hadn't watched this show. I feel like I have to do something about that. It's kind of ruined a few things for me. I have to warn myself not to watch this show. I have to go back.
What a breath of fresh air after that absolute f***ing shit show. The first MCU show to receive a second season, and boy did it deserve it. I don't think it ever quite hits the off-the-rails highs of the first season with the Loki variant and Richard E. Grant, but I don't remember a single scene that I didn't really enjoy in this season as well. Needless to say, this was my favourite so far, and I think that Echo and What If are going to have a really hard time topping this one. Also, just quickly, before we get into the review, I'm aware of the controversies surrounding Jonathan Majors and Tara Strong. Jonathan Majors is a piece of shit, and I don't like Tara Strong, but it's not really that relevant for this video. Loki as a character has had such a long journey in the MCU, from the first Thor through multiple Avengers, and now 2 seasons of his own show. He's gone through so much change and growth through the years that we've seen him on screen, and I think they place him perfectly for a bittersweet and cathartic send-off. Tom Hiddleston brings that same level of palpable charisma we've all come to expect from him to every single scene and never misses a beat. I do, however, think that Season 1 was a better showcase of his strengths and abilities. Season 2 lacks a little bit in the character focus department, and while I can understand that having done so much of it already, I would have liked a few more moments throughout just to catch up with Loki himself before the finale. Oh, good stuff, Loki. Torture always gives you accurate and timely information. I'm sad they almost completely sidelined Sylvie this season. I really enjoyed her story in Season 1, but even when she does show up, she barely ever speaks now. The other characters are all great, and are picking up the slack, but I did feel her absence. Speaking of other characters, OB, played by Ke Huy Quan, is such a perfect fit for this show. In the early episodes, and some of the later ones too, he's a little relegated to being an exposition machine, but he does it with enough adorable, quirky comedy that it never feels too heavy-handed. Good on you, Marvel, you finally delivered a bunch of exposition in a way that didn't make me angry. Mobius is as compelling and endearing as he was last season, and his chemistry with Loki carries quite a lot of the emotional weight here too. It's nice to be able to jump in with their relationship already established, so we can simply watch them going on this multiverse-saving adventure together. Seeing Mobius as a jet ski salesman made my year. Renslayer and Miss Minutes provide more than adequate antagonism when needed, but I'm glad that the show doesn't rely on them entirely. And, of course, Victor Timely is a good, if sometimes over-the-top addition to the squad, bringing a whole bunch of issues with him, not the least of which being Sylvie's intentions to kill him on sight. I really enjoyed the chaos of the 3rd episode when he's introduced, and his spaghettification at the end of episode 4 genuinely shocked me. I think every episode did a really good job of shifting the paradigm of the show, keeping it fresh and making you wonder what was going to come next.
From the very get-go with Loki's time slipping, you know you're in for a mind-bending mystery. And while I don't think the rest of it quite matches that frenetic intensity and confusion in the first episode, it kept me intrigued the entire way through. I also like how the unique setup of this show allows the writers to lay disaster after disaster on us without bringing the entire show to a grinding halt. Yes, it cheapens the stakes a little to know that you can go back and try again, but it takes us a long time to get to that point, and if anything, seeing the repeated and continued futility of these efforts reinforces the danger. This darker tone thankfully never feels overbearing, but overall it is definitely more somber than the first season. Speaking of do-overs, I loved the time loop sequence in episode 6. Seeing the other characters' confusion as Loki breezes through the events he's clearly lived through countless times was fantastic, and it's a great way to preserve tension while showing us why he knows all of this. I also enjoyed the split conversations with OB in episode 1, talking to Loki in the past and Mobius in the future. That was great. While we're on a positive thread here, the opening is such a great hook, and so much of episode 1 can only happen because it's the second season of a show. The interior of the TVA is brilliantly stylistic, and I love the visuals. The aesthetic of the sets and the way they've made it feel like such a huge labyrinth is just wonderful. The CGI for the wider TVA outside the windows is gross and I hate it, but pretty much everything inside is great. In fact, the visuals in Loki are just better overall than the other shows. I don't know if it's because the effects team had more time or what, but the time loom, the entire finale, and all the spaghettification looks so great. Actually, the spaghettification is genuinely quite creepy. They did a really good job of instilling dread. There's some fun cinematography too, like this record spinning shot, and just small other moments that cement you further into the setting. And that's it. You've heard all of my complaints about this show, and most of my major praises. And look, I could sit here for quite a long time just going over all the little things I liked, but I don't think that's necessary, and I do have to move on at some point. As I said, this is my favourite so far, and I don't see that changing in this video. I don't think we're going to see any more of Loki as a show or a character, and if that's the case, then this is such a perfect and fitting send-off for him, and the visuals of Yggdrasil and him with his horns in the finale is such a great way of tying him back to his Norse roots. Get it? Roots. Go watch Loki. If you haven't seen season 1, binge it all. If you haven't seen season 2, what are you doing? Go watch season 2. Hell, pause this video right now and go do it. I'll still be here when you get back. Yes, it does require a bit of requisite knowledge from the MCU, but I doubt that's much of a barrier for entry for anyone watching this video. Much like Loki himself, it's not perfect, but I love it anyway. What If is a mixed bag. The very premise makes this almost inevitable. Fortunately, the highs are high and the lows are infrequent. I do think that season 1 was better overall than season 2, and I'll go into some reasons for that, but there is still a lot to enjoy about What If. First of all, the animation has only got better. Season 1 already looked good, but season 2 is drop-dead gorgeous. I love this art style, and they clearly know how to use it well. There are some seriously striking visuals in every single episode, and all the familiar features of the MCU are recognizable, but not out of place. The fight scenes are similarly brilliant. There's some terrific shots, editing, and choreography that make each one distinct and just a joy to watch. We start off well with a solid and frenetic first episode, but things only go up from there. It's hard to go into specifics because I feel like I'd be repeating myself a lot. Suffice it to say that each individual episode has a wacky premise that I never would have thought of, and for every one I kept thinking to myself, this is the best so far. The Die Hard story was good, the Grandmaster Mario Kart race was fun as, the Captain Carter Black Widow team-up was a nice callback and mix-up, and episode 6 with the introduction of Kahori was amazing and had the best visuals and was probably the best episode out of all of them. Episode 7, again, felt like a really interesting take on two stories that we'd seen before, but sadly, after this one, I think the quality dips a little. Seeing the 17th century Avengers was cool for a bit, but it felt like too much Marvel thrown at a wall, if that makes sense. It is an onslaught of jokes, quips, and questionable dialogue. It feels like they've jammed too many characters into this episode way too quickly. The pacing in general is a lot faster than other properties. They're telling mostly contained stories within half an hour. This is usually okay, but sometimes it leads to some rushed and unsatisfying endings. Episode 7 falls victim to this, where episode 6 is the most consistent of the bunch. So the 9th episode is a little different. There are hints here and there about plots or characters converging, and we see a little bit of that in episodes 5 and 8, but in the finale we find out that Strange Supreme is back, and he's trying to piece together his old universe by feeding powerful people to a forge. Not cool, dude. He's an interesting character, and I liked his arc in the first season, but I kinda wish they'd gone with something else for the finale. It just didn't have as much weight as season 1, and I kinda already got my fill of Strange Supreme back there anyway. In fact, as much as I enjoyed the through line of collecting heroes to stop Ultron in the first season, I thought season 2 shone brightest in the self-contained stories. It was nice to have a bit of a disconnect with such a variety of interesting situations and characters. I also felt a little frustrated that the final fight came down to the Infinity Stones again, with the added touch of way too many characters. What if all the weapons and heroes and powers? Still a much better execution of this idea than Secret Invasion, though. My only other nitpick is that Strange Supreme's dialogue is really quite cringe.
Oh, Peg, have I got a story to tell you. Oh, come on, you're already tired of first-run Shakespeare and outdoor plumbing? By the looks of things, this happy hour could use a little more happiness.
Why is it like this? Much of the other dialogue isn't amazing due to the fast pace of the show, but his is the worst. I feel like that's all I really have to say about What If. Obviously, the bad effects aren't a problem in this show, and once you get past some of the not quite perfect impressions,
Really picks you up, doesn't it? Your stunned silence is flattering.
But I did manage to wrestle this from some palace guards on the way over.
the vocal performances are all great. I enjoyed it, but I definitely enjoyed some episodes more than others. I'd recommend giving it a watch for sure, especially if you saw and liked the first season. It probably doesn't have that huge an impact on the wider MCU though, so you can easily skip it. Last but not least, it couldn't possibly be least. God, Secret Invasion was so bad. So Echo's drawn the short straw by being the last show on this list. Not only have I just watched a bunch of Marvel stuff that sort of blends together, but it's following 2 really good shows. Shows that, unfortunately, are both better than this one. Now, I'm trying to keep my MCU fatigue out of this as much as I can, but there is a small element of that feeling that matters. This is the latest in a long line of Marvel properties, and if you want to stand out, then you have to either be uncommonly good or genuinely unique. I don't know that I can comfortably say that Echo has achieved either. This sounds like a very negative intro, so let me clarify by saying that I don't think Echo is bad. It's not that good, but it's not an unenjoyable experience. And while I don't think it stands out very much in terms of its tone or overall plot, I will absolutely commend it for its representation and its exploration of Native American culture. So let's talk about tone first. It's a fair bit darker than some of the other shows on this list, and handles some heavy topics. Trauma, cycles of violence, vengeance. It has brutal fights and injuries, gritty action, and intense emotional plot threads. It's a good point of difference from shows like Ms. Marvel, which was clearly aimed at younger audiences, or She-Hulk, which was mainly a comedy. Unfortunately, in a very Marvel kind of way, there is still a lot of moments of tonal mismatch. And again, it starts off better than it ends. The story's interesting enough, but the pacing is really awkward, and after that first episode, it grinds along too slowly. Echo is clearly more interested in showing us the intricacies of Maya as a character than it is with showing us what she's planning and where the events are leading to. We get more characterization and exploration for Maya than we do for any other character by several orders of magnitude, but I still think they missed the mark a little bit. I know a lot about her backstory and why she is the way that she is, but I don't know much at all about what she's planning to do with her newfound freedom, and it takes too long to get us where we need to go. When all is said and done, it feels like 5 episodes of setup for something that we don't get to see for several years. The rest of the characters are pretty forgettable, to be honest, apart from Kingpin. He is an absolute standout, and Vincent D'Onofrio is perfect for the role. Chilling and sinister and unhinged when he needs to be. He's just great on screen. Maya herself is good too. I liked seeing her past, especially interspersed with what we've already seen in Hawkeye. And Alaqua Cox is shockingly good for this being her first role. She brings an impressive gravitas without saying a single word. Really mad props to her. Maya and Kingpin are easily the best parts of this show, and when they're together, it's always exciting. Some other regular complaints are back, the first being the visuals. From the very first moment of the show, I was disappointed. The first scene is fuzzy, hazy, and just looks awful. And so does the entire train sequence. It just felt very fake and set-like. Also, I don't know that they're using the volume for this tower scene. I can't prove it, but it really looks like it, because I'm not buying into this visual space at all. I also have to complain just a little bit about the dialogue. It's mostly fine, but sometimes it gets really heavy-handed with the themes. Family, revenge, trauma, loss, all complex topics, only some of them handled with finesse. The idea of Maya returning to her family and learning to exist amongst them starts off well, but over the course of the show, it retreads itself too many times. Also, I know I said I enjoyed Maya and Kingpin together, but there's only so many times you can have sinister conversations and maintain that same level of tension. The fights are a mixed bag. The first episode features some fantastic choreography and cinematography, with big sweeping shots that show us all of the action without chopping it up. It's impressive and looks really good. There's also a satisfying level of brutality that was hinted at in Hawkeye. The Daredevil fight isn't as great, but it still holds up. Later, however, they seem to revert back to the regular Marvel quick cuts and edits, which makes many of them look bland. Even the final confrontation was pretty anticlimactic in my opinion. She's finally embracing her family and her ancestors are with her, granting her these mysterious powers. We still don't know what they do though, even now at the very end. I might be an idiot, I'll acknowledge that, but still. Lastly, the use of silence is really strong throughout the show. They use it sparingly in fight scenes to bring further intensity, and it's really effective at putting us in Maya's point of view, especially in the car crash. That was great. I never felt like they overused it either, and I think that has to do with the level of noise that they chose. It's not often complete silence. There's usually like a heartbeat to go along with it and elevate the tension. Really good stuff. Sadly, I have to say that my MCU journey ended on a bit of a disappointing note. I found Echo to be quite a middle-of-the-road production plagued by the Marvel formula and its constraints. I don't even know how much I can recommend this one. If you really enjoyed Hawkeye and Maya as a character, then maybe give it a shot, but otherwise I don't think it's worth it as a general rule. Plus, I've just spoiled parts of it for you anyway. The format of this video is not my greatest idea. So for the first time on this channel, we have a special guest. Everyone please welcome my fiancée, Bree. Bree, please say hello to American males aged 18 to 34 is my biggest demographic, so...
Hello, American males aged 18 to 34.
Wow, you're just gonna leave everyone else out like that?
And everyone else.
Thank you. So we've seen the entire MCU now.
Well,
no, I have.
yeah.
You've missed out on a few.
I skipped Secret Invasion, so...
She skipped Secret Invasion and Echo and What If. So out of the things that you did watch, what was your favourite?
Loki Season 2, hands down.
Same.
Come on,
Yeah.
like...
What was your favourite part about it, and why was it Mobius's mustache?
There were so many things. Like, I don't know if I can really pinpoint one. The spaghettification... Sorry. The spaghetti... How do you say it?
Spaghettification.
Spaghettification.
Okay, we'll cut it out.
The spaghettification was quite cool, and it was really eerie, but for some reason I really liked how eerie it was.
Yes.
Like that moment.
Really sick.
Victor Timely, that was like
Yeah.
shock value moment.
When
that
he
was
gets
so
spaghettified at the end of
good.
episode 4. But
Yeah.
also when, like, after that, when Loki's standing in the TVA and the TVA is, like, spaghettifying around him.
Oh, so
that was
cool.
really cool.
So cool. Yeah, there were so many good moments in that TV show. I don't think I could actually just pick one.
Fair.
But everything
Yeah.
was amazing. Are you going to ask me what my favourite moment in the entire of what we watched was?
Sure, if you
The
want to tell
cat
me.
scene.
Oh, the
in
Flurkin
the
scene.
Marvels? Are you kidding? Marvel, best thing you've ever done. Ever.
Okay, what was your least favourite thing that we've watched? You did watch one episode of Secret Invasion, so I would accept that as an answer.
Look, I was in it for about 10 minutes and then I went straight to my phone. Secret
That's
Invasion.
the right decision. Having
Did
seen
not pull me in. It was just a bunch of people sitting in a room talking about not much.
my least favourite thing was Secret Invasion 2. So...
Secret Invasion 2 since when?
Oh god, no, they should never make a second Secret Invasion. That was terrible. It was Secret Invasion as well. It was really boring. Like, you didn't watch the whole thing, but, like, I can't
Great
describe to you
sacrifice.
how little actually happened during that show. Do you think that the MCU has fallen off after Endgame?
A little bit. I mean, it depends, because there are some really good things in there that where you go, oh my god, yes, this is Marvel. And then there's Secret Invasion. I mean, what the hell was that? And I'm really sorry to everyone who likes Secret Invasion, to each their own, you know?
I don't think anyone who likes Secret Invasion is still watching this video after I trashed it for like 10 minutes straight.
So, to answer your question, yeah, I guess it did fall off a little bit. However, they're still making some really great shows. And some of the shows that we watch, like She-Hulk, you hear a lot of mixed reviews about that show, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. You know, there are a few cringy moments, but I don't think it was anything too over the top. I actually thoroughly enjoyed some of those moments. It just took a second to get used to.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people are pretty quick to say that everything that the MCU is bringing out now is bad, and I don't think that's true.
No.
I think they're bringing out a lot more, so it's more likely to be bad.
Succession as well, I feel like it was a lot all at once. Like, they were just like, content. Let's give content to the fans.
Let me give you a few pieces of trivia. Because in 2021 alone, just 2021, Marvel released 4 movies and 5 shows.
Wow.
9 things in 1 year.
Did that include Moon Knight?
I think so.
Wow. If so, good on you guys, because I loved that. That was probably my next favorite. I want to see a season 2 of that. I want to see more of that.
Yeah.
That was really, really good.
There are a lot of characters that I would like to see more of, but because, I mean, thankfully, I think they're slowing down. We're probably not likely to see them for a few years at least.
Which might be a good thing, like it might give it room to breathe.
That's just too much. 9 things in 1 year. Do you think, A, that now that they've slowed down a bit, that things will pick up in quality? And B, do you think that Deadpool and Wolverine will get people back on the Marvel train?
Yeah, I think the quality will improve.
It should.
It should. I mean, if their track record from pre-Endgame is to tell us anything.
Even before Endgame, there were plenty of highs and lows.
Yeah.
Thor 2, Age of Ultron, Iron Man 3 I didn't love.
Yeah, no, I definitely think Wolverine and Deadpool will bring it back, for sure. I'm so keen to see that film.
I'm pretty excited.
It's like the perfect mix of comedy and like classic handsome men.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty keen to see Hugh Jackman back in the role. Look, like,
100%. It's going to be really, really cool.
Hopefully, right? Like, it gives me a bit of hope, because I think that he had said previously, obviously, he wanted to finish it with Logan, and it makes me hopeful, because I go, well, if he's come back, then surely he's come back for a good reason. And so maybe it's because he really likes the script and he thinks that it's a great idea. They reckon it's the mutant era coming up soon. So I guess we'll see what they're building towards and if it's any good.
Yeah. Bring back Kamala.
Yeah, Kamala Khan's great. She's like, honestly, pretty much my favorite character.
It was like a breath of fresh air.
Thank you for joining me in your own house. Please say goodbye to Brie, and Brie, wave goodbye to all of the people that are watching it.
Bye, everyone, this time.
Also, everyone, if you would be so kind as to leave a comment about how Brie is the greatest special guest I've ever had on this channel, that'd be great.
Don't feel pressured to leave a comment.
Leave a comment.
Obviously, there were praises and critiques that I've left out of this video for the sake of brevity. I could have gone on for ages, or I guess ages more, if I was really nitpicking or properly gushing, but I do have to finish this video. As one example though, I forgot to mention Banner's son. His introduction, I think it's dumb, and I don't really care about him at all. It's sort of the same with T'Challa's son, T'Challa. Not sure how to feel about him either, but to be fair, I don't really have to care about them for years anyway. So Brie and I touched on it earlier, but the quality of the MCU has always been up and down. I do think that it is undeniably more noticeable and more profound now though. There's way more being released at the moment. Like, way more. The lows are getting lower, like Quantumania and Secret Invasion, and the highs aren't as high. But how could they be? Endgame wasn't an amazing movie, but it was a cultural phenomenon that we're unlikely to see ever again. So of course Phases 4 and 5 weren't going to be the same. But Phases 4 and 5 are also way more similar to Phases 1 and 2, in that they're setting up for something bigger. However, even though there has been No Way Home as a similar sized fan event to the first Avengers, I do still think that they've lost their way a little. They had been building towards making Kang the next Thanos-level threat, but not only was Quantumania incredibly bad, but Jonathan Majors is out. So what do they do now? They have to completely pivot, and all the properties leading up to it have to pivot as well.
goodbye Kang Dynasty, I guess. Kevin Feige has said that they're going to be focusing on bringing mutants into the MCU, so I assume we'll see a lot more of that in Deadpool and Wolverine, obviously, and Captain America. But that's not their only problem. The Marvels was a huge flop, and Quantumania didn't do super well either. Now, they said that they've learned their lessons and they're going to readjust their strategy and output, but I will believe that when I see it. They just released way too much, way too fast, and you can either do something fast or you can do it well. That's why almost all of the shows had terrible CGI, some had really half-baked scripts, and so many had very poor pacing. There are some gems in there though. Loki Season 2, Guardians 3, Shang-Chi, No Way Home, Ms. Marvel, all good, all came after Endgame. Also, the big gap between everything else and Deadpool and Wolverine gives me hope. So does Hugh Jackman. Obviously, it could end up being bad. People screw up great characters all the time, but you really think that they'd put a bit of care into this one. I guess we'll see in a few days. Anyway, thank you so much for watching some bloke review Marvel stuff. I really appreciate you taking a chance on the channel. Since I've posted my Snyderverse video, I've gained well over 1,000 subscribers, which is just bonkers. Both that video and my Biomutant video have reached 100k, so I'm riding pretty high right now. Thank you to everyone watching and commenting and liking. I know there's some people out there who might complain about how negative I was about the Snyderverse and how positive I've been about the MCU, but there are a few explanations for that. First, I basically grew up with the MCU, so it's pretty nostalgic for me. Second, I wasn't nitpicking super hard in this video, just giving a sort of brief overview of the stuff I missed. And third, I just subjectively enjoy the MCU more. Not everything. Quantumania and Secret Invasion are way worse than the Snyderverse, but in general, it caters better to my taste in superhero films, which aren't even my favourite genre of films anyway. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know what you think of my weird and possibly wildly unpopular opinions in the comments down below. Also, if you do like this video format for some reason, then let me know and I might do something similar in the future for Star Wars or the DCEU. Anyway, huge thanks for making it through the entire video, and have a good one.